did my time. I paid for my crime.
I want to say a big good evening going out to each and every single one of you this morning, no matter this evening. Need to remember where I am, because I've just finished a whole 12-hour work shift. But wherever you are across the globe, this is another edition of Issues Today live on World Jam Global Radio.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die.
Just to remind you that the show is back at its normal time next week, Saturday.
I learned my lessons in the streets. There was not a man I
got another powerful show lined up for you, Loving an Alien.
I was swimming in women.
But tonight, my friends,
over the street, I was getting money.
We're talking food, not bombs.
The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all.
First and foremost, we send our apologies. Desiree Lynn could not make it today. But we do have the co-founder of Food Not Bombs, Mr. Keith McHenry, alongside my regular co-host, shotgun rider and dear friend, Dr. David Remay.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all.
As we said, when we advertise this particular show, when feeding the homeless gets termed as an act of terrorism, and volunteers are arrested, criminalized, and face jail time, when cops go in search of soup kitchens and outreach workers or hound defensive homeless individuals from their already uncomfortable environments, when the agenda is to make life harder for those already finding it hard, it's time to say enough is enough. This was brought to my attention some time ago, and we've really been keen to put this show together.
Already did my time.
Most of you who know me know the fact that I've worked with the homeless for many years and have run my own soup kitchen right here in Coventry. Also co-founder of the Anessis Homeless Ministry alongside my wife, which is still running and managed by the church right here in Bell Green, Coventry.
I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary.
And although we experienced some difficulties with local councils and various individuals at times, we've never faced what they're facing out there in America, trying to meet the needs of the hungry and the homeless.
Things have changed. The whole game has been rearranged. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my.
But we're gonna take it.
About being no gangster, life is too short to spend it all in jail. Trying to cope with this living hell.
To the limit.
Did my time. I paid.
As we talk to Keith McHenry. This is a very strange one for us, by the way, because as we go live, you will find out that there's some strange stuff going on as we speak.
Already did my time. I paid.
And that's because Keith McHenry is currently cooking and serving to hundreds of people live as we talk. Imagine that. Well, there's a first for everything, and that's a first for Issues Today on World Jam Global.
I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now I'll sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again.
As I set up all my last minute.
But I was nobody's chump. Me and Billy the Kid had a lot in common. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator, especially all you haters. Already did my time, paid for my crime. Already did my time, already did my time. I paid for my crime, already did my time.
The opening statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison.
Trying to cope with this living hell.
Okay. Let's just take it live.
And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those.
As we're going to link up with our very own Dr. David Ramey. Go ahead. Hello, David. How are you?
Hello, Kervin. I'm in Connecticut, and our skies are cold, but it's very sunny and a blue sky, about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Terrible. I'd like to say hello to Keith before I begin my introduction today. Keith, are you there?
I am here. I'm at India Joe's restaurant with volunteers preparing a meal for today.
Super. Now, we're going to get to you in about 7 minutes, but I want to let you know, Keith, welcome aboard. Everything you hear, we hear on the radio. So if you could just cut your mic for about 6 or 7 minutes and stay tuned in, then we'll come right back to you, all right?
Okay. Hopefully I can figure out how to do that and not lose you.
Just put it on, put your computer on mute, the Skype on mute.
Okay, I'm going to look for that.
Because I'm hearing all your workers and your sink running, and I'm getting hungry hearing about that food.
Yeah, it's gonna kind of make me hungry too, because I haven't eaten.
Ah, well, hello, Kervin, my friend. I always love talking to you about what's going on in the colonies, as you like to say in Britain. Yesterday, I was at Yale University in New Haven and visited the Three Queens exhibition, a remarkable exhibition of the George I, George II, and George III consorts, Queen Augusta, Queen Caroline, and Queen Charlotte, three powerful women who had a great deal of influence on the cultural and political lives of their times. And the artwork, and with Handel and these brilliant men, Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, and all the other greats of that incredible pre-Victorian England, was a source of constant amazement and hope for me. Because in America, our clouds are very, very dark. It is not an issue of enlightenment and industrialization and progress. It is far more a descent into a Nero type of evil. Trump standing on top of a burning White House, playing the fiddle and accusing everyone but himself of defecating upon the great flag and majesty of our nation's history. We have woken up this morning in America to tweets from the maniac in the White House, who is currently at his Palm Beach mansion, and he accused President Obama of wiretapping Trump Towers during the election illegally. Of course, it's not even possible for the president to give such an order. That has to go through a FISA court. The Trump maniac provided absolutely no evidence for his accusation. And he made 3 or 4 of these rabid, hate-fueled tweets, and then he went right on to criticizing Arnold Schwarzenegger's television program. We truly have a malignant cancer in the White House. This isn't like King George III in his latter days of madness, running around Buckingham Palace or Windsor screaming about bats flying in the windows, or his toilet machine not working. This is about a man who has his finger on the nuclear weapon button of the United States of America. This is a man who is determined to go to war with Iran. This is a man who likes people like the North Korean dictator, a little pudgy Pillsbury boy who is a freak. There's no other word. In the old days, you would have to go to a circus freak show to see these people. Now, what's going on in America with this mentally disabled president of ours? In the last 30 days, Kervin, he signed a bill authorizing the sale of guns, handguns, and big weapons to 75,000 mentally disabled Americans. Now, these mentally disabled people are getting Social Security because they can't work. They're so mentally disabled. But thanks to the National Rifle Association and President Trump and the Republicans, they are now able to buy weapons. Weapons. Do you remember who shot Ronald Reagan? A mentally disabled man. We have him abolishing many of the regulations of the EPA, so we can expect to start breathing really bad air very soon and other toxins in our environment. He also deregulated the coal industry, a prohibition on putting coal ash and other toxins in our fresh river waters and streams. He's deregulating the oil industry. He has 4,000 senior level positions in the government, and he's only filled 600 of the 4,000 in the first 40 days. He's already threatened NATO. He's made the Baltic states feel insecure. He's warming up to dictators in Eastern Europe. He loves Putin. He encourages the breakup of Europe and England. And what's even more amazing is that his first speech to the Congress, he put up in the stands the widow of a Navy SEAL whose husband died in an unnecessary, unprepared, and absolutely indistinguished criminal raid in Yemen that was a failure. He made the decision to go to war in Yemen, an attack in Yemen, over a hot dog dinner with Jared Kushner and Michael Flynn whispering in his ear instead of in the war room of the White House. The man is totally off his rocker. General Mattis, who they call Mad Dog Mattis, who killed 800 civilians in Fallujah, last week wanted to board a ship in international waters belonging to Iran. Why? Because Jared Kushner and Benjamin Netanyahu and Mattis, along with Trump, are absolutely determined to go to war in Iran. So now we have a situation where Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General of the United States of America, the highest law enforcement official in our country, the man 20 years ago rejected for a federal judgeship, notice racist in Alabama, a man whose first act was to withdraw the U.S. government from prohibiting Texas of their policies and law to discriminate against black people in Texas for voting. In Texas, if you have a gun ID, you can use that to vote, but you can't use an official state Texas student ID to vote. Now, that tells you where they're going with that one. Moreover, Jeff Sessions, under oath to Congress, to the Senate, answered Senator Leahy with a lie, Senator Franken with a lie, and then he put in writing a lie denying that he ever met with the Russians. 3 lies under oath. And then he took nearly 6 weeks to correct his lies, and only then after it was revealed. Now, normally, a senator would be called back and demanded that he tell the truth before Congress so that we could ask him additional questions. But his good friend, the Republican chairman Grassley, is not going to call him back. This is amazing. We impeach a president of the United States named Bill Clinton for denying that he had sex with some little girl in the White House. And we impeach him and try him for this. But we are not concerned when the senior law enforcement official of the United States of America, Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions III of racist Alabama, lies 3 times under oath, committing perjury about his relations with the Russian ambassador to the U.S., a noted spy, and there's no problem. Truly, I know the feeling of Lord Cornwallis at Yorktown when he felt the world had turned upside down. 70,000 American employees at the State Department are in a grave situation today because Trump wants to cut their budget by 40%. 40%. The more we have cutting of the soft budget, of American international development aid, of ambassadors, the more we work less for peace, the more we have to work against war. And of course, that means we will fail, and they will have their war. In fact, today in the New York Times, Roger Cohens wrote, and Roger Cohens is one of the greatest foreign writers in America. He wrote that working with the State Department, as it has been hollowed out under Trump, is like going to a third world in which there's no professional foreign policy or personnel. And the only way you know anything about the foreign policy of a third world dictatorship is to ask the royal family or the dictator's family what's going on. And that's how it is with Trump. If you want to know anything, it's not the Secretary of State Tillerson who won't even have a press conference. You've got to go to Jared Kushner, 35-year-old billionaire. Father paid for him to go to Harvard, absolutely in league with Netanyahu, determined to have a war with Iran, and a kiss butt to Putin of Russia. You've got to go to this guy who doesn't even speak a foreign language, whose wife says she's an Orthodox Jew, and she goes to the Congress of the United States for the most formal evening we have in our nation's body politic, and she's wearing a dress showing her bra strap and showing her boobs. This is not an Orthodox Jew. This is an imposter.
A Jezebel.
A Jezebel imposter. And now let me say this. Trump and Flynn and Sessions and Kushner and Manafort and Craig have all met with the Russian ambassador. And they all have one thing in common, Kervin. They won't tell us why.
Yeah.
First, they deny it. And then when we ask, they won't tell us why. Why? What are you hiding? What? Now, let me give you an example of how they're in league with this Netanyahu and Kushner. Since Trump took over, 900 Palestinian villages have been destroyed. Over 3,000 Palestinians and Bedouins in the desert of the Negev have been run out of their homelands, and they've been destroyed. Now, let me tell you, 817 American Muslims have been attacked since Trump became president, and 23 Jews have been threatened. And the whole world in America is demanding the FBI, CIA, DIA, everything in the world to help these Jewish synagogues, but nobody gives a damn about the 817 Muslims. Now I ask you, is there not a double standard? We've got a Secretary of Education who's going around saying we have to have more private schools and close the public schools and give a tax break to the poor blacks. Well, guess what? Poor white people, poor blacks, poor Hispanics, and poor Americans all have one thing in common. Poor people don't make tax reports and therefore can't get a tax rebate. So what you're really saying is you're going to leave them there uneducated to be turned into slaves for the future. And the Republicans with Trump have this Obamacare disaster. They want to repeal, and replace, they say, Obamacare. But what they're really doing, my friend Kervin, is they're killing Obamacare. They're throwing 22 million people off of the health rolls. They're going to make the insurance companies wealthier. And they're playing a charade unworthy of the devil raping the virgin himself. Now, this Paul Ryan, this Mike Pence, this General Mattis, this Jared Kushner, this Rod Tillerson, this Steve Bannon, Reince Priebus, Jared Kushner, and Kellyanne Conway, they have polluted the American polity. And we can overcome it in time. We will recover from their evil, but we will not recover from their war. And I'm telling you now, North Korea is a disaster waiting. But let me tell you one more thing before I close. This is shocking to me as an American and as a Jewish person. Remember, you always hear me say, I am a Jewish American. I believe in Italian Americans, German Americans, Jewish Americans. I am not an American Jew. There's no such a thing as a Jew as a nationality. You're an Israeli or you're an American. But you're not a Jew. That's your religion. That's like me saying, oh, you're a British Protestant. You're not a British Protestant. You're a Protestant who's British. Now, this week, Isaac Herzog, who's supposed to be the middle-of-the-road moderate, Isaac Herzog in Israel came out and he said that Israel must make an urgent appeal to prepare for 10 million, not Jewish Americans, but 10 million American Jews to immigrate to Israel because some of the Jewish clinics here and centers have been threatened by crazy people. Now, can you imagine? All of Israel has only 7 million Jews. So we're going to 1.5 times go into Israel. It's going to be 23 million people living in Israel with the Arabs and Muslims and Palestinians and Jews and America. How is a little piece of land half the size of New Jersey, how is that little piece of land going to support 23 million people when they don't have enough water now to give a goat a good shower? Now, it's disgusting to me that he would make that kind of impetuous, impertinent, and imbecilic comment because it tells people that we who are Jewish Americans are not American. I served in this army. My family gave the blood for this country in World War II. My country is my country. Their country is their country. Don't start with that dual nationality crap, Isaac Herzog and Benjamin Netanyahu, and do not persuade this country with this imbecilic Russian-owned troll to go to war against 95 million Iranians when we couldn't defeat 20 million Iranians, 20 million Iraqis. How are we going to defeat 95 million Iranians on the border of the Soviet Union, Russia today? It is impossible. So that's where we are today. We are on the very edge of survival as a civilized nation itself. And we must do something about this man. And every time, Kervin, how many times we interviewed people on this show and they said there's no difference between Jill Stein and Gary Robertson and Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. They're out of their minds. If you don't think there's a difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald imbecilic, insane Trump, you're out of your gourd. You're undeserving to be a part of a body politic, and you ought to go back to school and learn how to think rationally. Because Hillary Clinton was a woman who was very badly treated, and Donald Trump is a man who puts the poor, the sick, the disabled, and the peace-loving people at risk of our very lives. And that's the way it is in America today.
Thank you very much for that, David. And just before we go to Keith McHenry, there's something that I need to say to you, David. All right? I'm going to apologize to you first and foremost, because I remember when we first started looking at the campaign between Clinton and Trump, I remember joining ranks with others and saying I couldn't vote for Clinton as much as I wouldn't vote for Trump. One was a racist and the other one was a crook, and I couldn't see a reason for voting for one or the other. And it was easy for me because I'm here in the UK and it doesn't necessarily, or I thought it wouldn't necessarily affect me. Well, we operate in hindsight, and I wish I had some foresight, because if I knew then what I know now, and I had an opportunity to re-influence people on what to do and where to go, I would have done whatever was possible to keep that orange-faced buffoon out of the White House. Anything. I would have voted for Nellie the elephant if I had to.
Well, thank you, Kervin. But you know it now, and now we can fight for the good cause.
Absolutely. Now, just before I introduce our guest today, I just want to read something from their website. Food Not Bombs is gaining momentum throughout the world. There are hundreds of autonomous chapters sharing free vegetarian food with hungry people and protesting war and poverty. Food Not Bombs is not a charity. This is energetic, all-volunteer grassroots movement. It is active throughout the Americas, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Australia. By the way, this is the first paragraph of what you would find on their website, so please feel free to go and search the Food Not Bombs website and follow the story. For over 30 years, the movement has worked to end hunger and has supported actions to stop the globalization of the economy, restrictions to the movements of people, end exploitation, and the destruction of the earth and its beings. Now, that's a very broad statement, and so therefore, there's only one person that we could actually get, or we should get, to tell us a bit more about what Food Not Bombs are about and what they represent, and possibly let's go into why on earth the government decided to choose to terminalize them as a terrorist organization. Good evening, Keith McHenry.
Thank you very much for having me, Kervin. This is great.
It's our pleasure, my friend, and we welcome you, open-hearted and open-armed. Please tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we're going to go into some Food Not Bombs issues.
Okay, well, I am an artist and a writer, and I've written 3 books, and I write essays. And I do been painting. I actually went to Boston University School of Fine Arts, and it was while going to school there. And I'd grown up in the national parks. My dad was a ranger. I had a lot of great experiences in the wilderness, and I was originally influenced to be an activist when my father gave me Walden by Henry David Thoreau, and I read on civil disobedience, and that's how we ended up getting connected to the idea of activism. And but then when at Boston University, I met Howard Zinn, the American history professor, and started to go to protests, and that's what influenced me to start Food Not Bombs. Are you here? The one moment I have to introduce a couple of people to the food. Excuse me? Okay, cool. Thank you very much. So I'm also cooking. So this for 75 people. I'm in Santa Cruz, California. Last Sunday, we had a total of 121 people that I counted with a clicker. And I believe there was even more people than that came to the meal.
Is that homeless people?
Mostly homeless people. And what's tragic here is in Santa Cruz, as is in many parts of the United States, they have closed the shelters at a time when the homeless population is increasing dramatically. So the New York Times and the Washington Post have both run articles about a study based on the census of the United States Census saying that there are 2,500,000 homeless children in the United States. And if there's that many homeless children in the U.S., imagine the millions that are adults that are living on the streets. And that's really the most visible population that you see are the homeless adults. But it is incredible what is going on it's like the Great Depression, essentially, here. Yet they're trying to sweep it under the rug by having people believe that there aren't really homeless people, that they're just like people that are just out to do whatever, and just aren't lazy or drunk or something like that. They don't have any connection to the idea that there are basically a failed economy going on.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing, Keith. I remember attending a meeting about 10 years ago with the homelessness services of our local council, our local government here in the UK, in Coventry. And in that meeting, they said that they have only 4 registered people as homeless in this borough, in this area. Now, I knew this not to be true because I have my soup kitchen that support the homeless on the streets. And this was on a Friday we had this meeting, and on the Sunday we had our own homeless. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna count this so I can take this back. And on the Sunday, on the Friday they give an official statement which actually went out in the newspapers saying that there were only 4 homeless people. And this is only in a small part of the UK. This is a place called Coventry, and just in the town centre itself. And on that day, I ran my soup kitchen. I counted 84 street homeless. And I'm not talking about people that are just without homes, or I'm talking about 84 who are sleeping in cardboard boxes or shop doorways or whatever, who actually have no home or no means to support themselves in a home whatsoever. And that's not all they were. That's all that I counted, and I stopped counting at 84. So when I took that back to the local borough to ask them how come our numbers differentiate so much, the response was quite chillingly simple. And let me explain it this way. Coventry City Council told me that the only people they count as homeless is those that they find sleeping in shop doorways. And that is because car parks are out of bounds, derelict buildings are out of bounds, parks are out of bounds, stairways in blocks of flats are out of bounds, abandoned vehicles or burnt out vehicles are out of bounds. Basically anywhere else is out of bounds because they don't feel safe to go and venture into certain places. So they only count those that they see in shop doorways in the town centre. And that's the only place they're allowed to go and count. So the actual official count for the homelessness is absolutely ridiculous, no matter where we are. So I fully understand how this count can get misrepresented. And I'm quite sure that America has a lot more homeless people than what people are actually logistically giving account of. But sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead, Keith. I just wanted to interject that.
Oh, no problem. Because that is definitely what we're seeing everywhere, that there's an undercount of homeless people. And so today we're preparing meal. We believe because of the nature of, it's the end of the month, so that's made it many more people last week. This will be less. It'll be like probably in the area of 75 people need the meal. Okay. And so that's, you'll hear on occasion me having to explain, I'm what we call the bottom liner. So Food Not Bombs started in 1980. And it was 3 things happened that caused Food Not Bombs to exist. The first thing was that I was a produce worker, and I was throwing away all this great organic produce at one of the earliest produce markets in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I started taking it to the projects. And at the projects across the street, one day we're talking, they're building this building, and we're talking to each other and stuff. And it turns out that it is called Draper Lab, and it's designing guidance system for intercontinental nuclear missiles. And at that time, Reagan had just been elected, and Star Wars was his big campaign promise, and they were cutting social services, shutting down public housing, diminishing food stamps and so on. And so when I realized they're spending all this money, literally like just meters away, on designing nuclear bombs, while we're across the street seeking recovered produce just to survive, that there was something wrong. And that's where the name Food Not Bombs came from.
Keith, let me jump in real quick. I love that because Trump is pushing a $54 billion increase in defense while he's cutting down needed care for the poor in America. I noticed in Santa Cruz, for example, there are estimated 9,000 homeless people, and you have a high rate of crime there. But if you're feeding 75 to 150 people, where do those other 8,900 go? Where do they eat?
Here's the thing. I'm not sure where Keith is at the minute and why he's not answering, but I'll say he's there.
Oh, go ahead.
Are you there, Keith? Right. I can't hear him in a minute. But here's the thing. I understand where that is, because we started dealing with 1 or 2 people here in Coventry. and before long we were supporting up to 350, and that's still not everybody.
Yeah, that'll be fine. Yeah, both. I'm back on. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, we lost contact there.
Okay, so Keith, David is going to re-ask the question that he just asked you when you went offline. Okay.
Keith, did you hear my question?
No, I didn't. We were
okay.
For some reason everyone probably go offline. I'm not sure what's up, but
it's your signal. Just keep an eye on your signal.
Okay. I noticed that in Santa Cruz there are 9,000 people who are homeless, and you're feeding 75 to 125 today, for example. Where are those other 8,900 people eating in your county?
Sadly, they probably are not eating with us on the weekend or anywhere on the weekend, because there's virtually no food on the weekend.
So what do they do? What do they do? I mean, how do they get food?
I think that people, this is the sad thing. A lot of people use heroin or methamphetamine just to get through the day, because it diminishes the suffering of not eating. Others are actually taking what little money they scrape up, but from panhandling and so on, and they put it, they buy like a McDonald's burger for a few dollars, that kind of thing. So that's the kind of stuff that goes on. And the weekday, fortunately, there are St. Francis Soup Kitchen, which feeds hundreds of people. And there are in other parts of the county, people, other food programs. But, it's not clear what most people do. And they've actually diminished there used to be a shelter here that provided meals, over 1,000 meals, but there was federal budget cuts, and it disappeared almost 2 years ago in July.
Here's the thing. So for all the good you might want to do, it's almost impossible for any one organization to feed all the people. It would just take too long to do that. So I understand how, one organization can't manage it all. So I think what David is trying to get to is you're dealing with what you can deal with, but who deals with everybody else?
Yeah, well, that's a sad thing. There shouldn't have been, when we started, there was virtually the people that Food Not Bombs was feeding in 1980, 81, 82, and back then were, it was more like an idea of bringing awareness to the possibility of there becoming homeless people in America because of the policies of Ronald Reagan. And of course, we had compatriots over in England that were concerned about Margaret Thatcher. So those kinds of things are, have been, ongoing. Now it's an actual emergency food program as well as outreach to try to change society to resist these policies. So.
Okay. So you feed them is one of the tools that you have. Is there anything else that you do to support them in any way?
Yeah, well, our principal idea is we have 3 principles which we adopted at a world meeting, and right now there's over 1,000 chapters in the world in over 65 countries, and our first world gathering was in 1992. And we came up with 3 principles: that the food would always be vegan or vegetarian and free to anyone, rich or poor, drunk or sober, and that there would be that we would be have no presidents or leaders or headquarters, that each group would be autonomous and make decisions using the consensus process, and that third, that we weren't a charity, but they were dedicated to nonviolent social change. With the idea of that we would try to change society so no one would live in the streets or have to eat at the soup kitchen. So a lot of our part of our focus, not only besides feeding people, is building popular support to try to change the society so that the policies like what Trump is proposing or what happened under Clinton and so on would not be happening, and that we would reprioritize our federal and local budgets to be, providing education, healthcare, and the kinds of things that would keep people off the streets. So that's a lot of our organizing effort is with that. and with being in solidarity with other organizations that are working towards the same goal, and that kind of thing.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Have you aligned yourself with any political organizations?
Not any overtly political organizations like that run candidates or something like that. I mean, there are like social movements that are working to end poverty, and so those groups would be like, for instance, the Catholic Workers Movement, Campaign for Nonviolence, so War Resisters League, and so on. 1 second, let me interrupt the radio to talk to the cooks.
Okay.
I was.
While he's talking to the cooks, David, are you there, David?
Yes, I love this. I love this that we're actually talking to somebody who does something to make the world better while he's doing it. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I'm kind of loving it too, because we're actually hearing the action in motion. And the thing is,
it's a public demonstration how you can really change other people's lives for the better and not surrender your own. I mean, you can still do it all at once.
It's the greatest accomplishment of my entire life was to be part of the Ines's homeless movement ministry, and the work that we did and still do will always bring a tear to my eye and soften my heart. And I still have a lot to do with individuals that I've supported from the get-go, involved, people who we've brought through drug addiction or alcohol dependency and homelessness, who've turned their lives around, and I still support it to this day, and I consider as friends even.
Okay. Yeah, you have a question? Yeah, do you got Paytan out there?
Okay.
Yeah.
He's still in his chat, so we can just carry on. But yeah, I was.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back.
Just did the. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. We're actually loving the fact that me and David were just talking about. We're actually loving the fact that we're talking to you while you're doing what it is that you do, which is I find absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's actually not quite as uncommon as you might think, that I'm doing a radio interview and feeding people or cooking or something like that, because we do this all the time.
Here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Yeah. We've never done this before, but here's the thing. See if you can find.
Put more water. Put some out of this green bucket. Sorry about that.
See if you can find one of these homeless guys or ladies and get them online. That's what I'd like. I'd like to ask.
I can get other talking to you.
I'd like to get an input from them as to what they get out of this too, how this helps them, and how long they've had to rely on this as a service, and what would they do if they couldn't come to you? Where would they go?
Yeah, I used to have a show called The Home.
We're losing you, Keith. It's just your signal, I think.
I'm sorry. Did you ask me a question that I didn't hear?
No, you were talking, but you just faded away.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you clearly now, sir.
Okay, cool. So did you ask me just a question?
No, I was hoping that you'd be able to get me somebody that's in your queue for some food to come on and for us to be able to talk to them as well.
Yeah, there's nobody right now we're at the kitchen.
Okay.
Preparing.
Okay.
And so it will be 4:00 when we actually share the food.
Okay. Okay.
Some people from the streets might walk by, and I can grab them.
If
I see them,
if that happens, it'd be absolutely wonderful to just do that.
Yeah, no. But I used to have a radio show where all I did was interview homeless people about their lives, and I would have subjects, like what do you do to sleep, what do you do to bathe, for what's your sex life like, what is it like to be a woman living outside. It was a really interesting program, and I on occasion had people, for the first time ever, they'd be indoors and they'd fall asleep in the studio because it was nice and warm, and they feel terrible to wake them up. So that happened.
Yeah.
There's a bucket of onions over here. Yeah.
Keith, let me ask you about because a lot of people have the impression, certainly in our side of the Atlantic in America, that the poor people are mainly Hispanic or black people. But in fact, Santa Cruz is what do you have? Less than 2% black population. So what is the demographic racial makeup of most of the people you help?
Actually, it is almost all white. There are maybe like 10 people of color. Huh? Maybe 5 more onions? Great. Yeah, and so there might be, so it is, and it's largely male, but I would say maybe about half, I mean, it's like less than half female, but not a lot less than half female. A lot of elderly people. And I would say a lot of the people, quite a number of the people were born and raised here. There's quite a number of people here that have lived here for 60 years and live on the streets. And part of the issue is that when Google and Facebook and all that started, which is not far from here, real estate speculators could see the big bucks in selling property to them. And it made the rents now are crazy expensive. And there's almost virtually no vacancy, so it's like a landlord's market, and that has driven people into the streets that were here for I have a really good friend that lived here. He was born here. His dad were born here, and his grandparents were born here, and he's lived on the streets for 60 years. And really, the only time he left the area was to go fight in the Vietnam War in the last days before the evacuation of Saigon. And so that's what we have here, is eating with food not bombs.
Do you have a lot of people that you come across that are alcohol dependent or drug addicted?
We do have a certain number. There are, of course, a lot of clean and sober people. There's a very active clean and sober community that supports each other, that are dedicated, that are every single week at our meal. And so, in fact, right next door to us, where we're cooking now, is a really well-loved AA meeting space where many of our friends meet there and then come down and eat with us later. But it's true, I run into people, we don't have access to drug and alcohol rehabilitation services. And so a night in a hotel here is roughly $150 a night at a cheap, bad hotel. And yet you can do heroin that keep you high all day long for $10.
Yeah.
And so people might end up on the street clean and sober. And then after a year or two of frustration, we have this whole program too where they give you this idea that you're going to get housing. And usually by the end of 3 years, you're kicked off the list. And very few people, under 100 people a year out of this 9,000 people get housing through the housing program.
See,
so they'll hold on to hope until they start using drugs or drinking or something.
I've worked as a support worker for homeless services as well here in Coventry, and one of the key things that we found through my work and through my charity was that most of the homeless people that we came across weren't actually alcohol dependent or drug addicted at the time that they became homeless. But these were things and tools resources that they ended up leaning on for them to cope with the circumstances that they found themselves in, to be able to master pain, to be able to, as you said earlier on, because they couldn't eat or they couldn't make their way to eat, the drugs were cheaper and also sustained them, so to speak, replaced the urgency to eat, the need to eat. You tend to find out, people who smoke cigarettes, for example, it's a real appetite killer. And if you want to put yourself off from eating for a while, the easiest thing you can do is smoke a cigarette, I suppose. So drugs and alcohol has become a coping strategy for many of those that were homeless, and it wasn't the position that they were in before they were homeless. Are you finding that out there as well, that the people out there were actually homeless first and then took to drugs or alcohol afterwards?
Kervin, I think we lost Keith.
Oh, I better call him back in again.
Yeah, ring him back in.
Yeah, he's lost his signal. He's got no signal. Anyhow, did you hear what I just said then?
I did, and I think that's very true. I know that in our own community here in Connecticut, we do a lot so that the people don't lose their dignity when they have to ask for assistance, and we do a lot of it anonymously. I'm very proud of one of my neighbors. Ever since his children were 5 or 6 years old, he made sure that they served.
Yeah, you're back, Keith. I know we lost you. I've just called you back in again.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, this on again, off again. But it kind of goes with the whole poverty, feeding people theme of this show.
Yeah. You got a poor line. You got a poor internet line. Poverty-stricken internet line.
Yeah, I don't know. Normally it seems pretty good, but I don't know what it is.
But we were talking. I was asking you about the type of clientele that you come across and whether or not they appear to be drug addicted or alcohol dependent before they were homeless, or was the alcohol dependency and drug addiction something that came later?
I would say that a high percentage of them were clean and sober when they, they might have been a social drinker or something like that, smoked marijuana or something. But by the time they get on the streets after a while.
We're losing him again. Are you there, David?
I'm here.
Yeah, I think you step in.
I wanted to ask also about what if the VA was doing anything, because he had mentioned that several of the people there had been in the community.
And then a fruit salad. But that kind of.
Keith, I wanted to ask you about the VA. Does it do anything to help the homeless veterans? Hello?
Yeah, there are some assistance with homeless veterans. And actually, can you hear me?
Yes.
Just about. You're going in and out, though.
Hello?
I can hear you, but you're going in and out.
Hello?
All right.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the one bright spot in relationship to homeless people in the United States was Obama's campaign to have homeless vets. And that, I would say, was probably the most successful. And so a large number of vets have gotten off the streets. And the VA, while difficult to access often, is definitely a help to people living on the streets that are veterans. But they certainly, it's horrible. You seem like you should be able to come back from war and be honored rather than have to struggle to get health care and housing.
We found something quite similar here in the UK. In the midst of all what we were doing, we started to come across ex-servicemen who had served their country, who had just been abandoned and left to fend with various different issues, ailments, mental health related issues, traumatized, PTSD and all the rest of it, and post stress disorder, etc., and had found themselves in all kinds of a mess, with nobody actually taking responsibility for helping them in any way, and I found that quite difficult to understand how you could go and serve your country, fight for your country, and come back with whatever issue you might come back with, but yet there was nothing or no one to help support you or nurture you back to some sort of normality. And I suppose we're hearing a lot about this out there. Let me just say, while I've got you on the line, and I'm not sure because I've not actually seen this on your site, but I was having a conversation with somebody back last year, and there was rumours that in about Chicago, there were about 200 odd war veterans who were homeless that had just gone missing from the streets. I'm not sure if you heard that report.
Welcome to Put Out Bombs. Oh, we just had some more volunteers here. 1 second. Cool. So what we could do is...
Right. While he's talking away, David, did you hear what I just said?
We'll be right back.
Right, you can be right back, but we're going to carry on talking because we can't have no dead air. We're not going to stay silent until you come. But yeah, David, I heard a report back last year about 200 veterans just disappearing from the streets without trace. We've never heard a follow-up of that. I don't know if you've heard any reports yourself about homeless veterans just disappearing or anything.
I haven't heard that, but I do know that President Obama did a great deal to assist veterans who are homeless and drug addicted and suffering from PTSD in ways that no other president has ever done. And especially considering that Republicans are so happy to send Americans to war, but so unwilling to help. You know, one of the things I'd like to say about that is after 9/11, which occurred on Bush's watch, those heroic firefighters and policemen, the first aiders who went up in that building to assist those people to survive, had to fight for 5 years before the Republican Congress would give them any medical benefits, for example. It's just beyond, but they tripped over themselves to give the wealthy stock owners' families millions and millions of dollars after their loved ones had died. Millions of dollars. Wow. But they wouldn't take care of the heroes who went in there to save the lives of so many. And I think it's a certain ingratitude in America that we have to deal with.
Yeah, one of the people I actually made friends with and became a volunteer on my soup kitchen was an ex-serviceman who went out to fight in Afghanistan with the British Army. And he came off a helicopter, and his best friend was blown up in front of him. And he had some real serious nightmares and flashbacks and PTSD, etc. But he had no help. And he was just traveling from city to city to keep trying to start his life back again, but messing up because obviously the state that he was in and not finding it easy to settle anywhere he went. And I think when he came here to Coventry, it was about one of the longest stays he had stayed anywhere. And then even after a while, that kind of burnt thin with him, and he's left and he's moved to another part of the country again. And I don't know where he is. I don't even hear from him anymore. But he stayed here for about 3 years. Again. Hi, Keith.
But Keith, let me ask you, what do you serve on a regular day there? So, example, if I walked in tonight, what would I be eating?
I heard you said regular something, but I wasn't.
If I walked in your facility,
it's live. You want to take a on Abby for a while?
Hello.
I have another really important volunteer from Food Not Bomb, Abby Sanders. Can she take over for a second?
Absolutely. Sure. What we would like is some continuity.
Kervin, ask her what she's serving today.
Okay. Abby, hello, Abby.
Very hard. Thank you so much.
Hi, Abby.
Hi, this is Abby. I'm a volunteer.
Hi, Abby. How long have you worked with Food Not Bombs?
I've been doing it since 2000, right after Occupy. So that was around 2011.
Okay. So you've been there for a while.
About 3 years.
Okay, before we talk a little bit...
Yeah, I've been doing it for a while.
Okay, before we talk a little bit more about you and everything else, what sort of stuff are you serving tonight?
Oh, boy, I just walked in. It looks like they're cutting up potatoes, and they usually have a big soup and the fruit salad. But it looks like right now a lot of people, there's around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. And looks like they're cutting up potatoes right now. And they have about 7 boxes of various items of fruit. And I don't know what they're doing in the kitchen.
Right.
They're probably doing a soup, is my guess.
Okay.
So it's all vegan.
Okay. And yeah, but they have said that, David, that's what they actually do.
All vegan, good.
Yeah. You're talking to a program called Issues Today. I'm here in the UK, and Dr. David is in Connecticut, and you're where you are.
Santa Cruz. Okay, so this show is going out live around the world as we speak.
So
let me ask you. Let me jump in, Kervin. Abby, what do you feel when you
they've gone. They've gone.
Oh,
I mean,
Scheisse.
yeah,
We
I know.
have the hardest time.
This is very frustrating. The signal's gone again.
Yeah, I was going to ask her how she feels after doing that work. Maybe you could answer.
Yeah, look, it's the most satisfying experience that we've ever had, that I've ever had in my life. I remember one particular Christmas. I'm going to share this story with you now, David. And if I do start to cry, please don't just forgive me, because I get really emotional in this particular story. I had a phone call from a social worker just before Christmas a few years ago, and she was telling me about a particular family who was going through a very difficult time. The mother had 6 children, and her husband, the father, had just died. And this was going to be the most miserable Christmas that they were ever going to have. And plus, the landlord of the house that they were living in, now that the husband had died and there was no man around, was trying to take the house back and move and push them out. And because they wasn't ready to leave, he was actually letting the house go into disrepair so that they would just not want to be there anymore. So the house is in an absolute state. I hadn't seen it yet, but this social worker asked me for help and said, would I help? And I've got to tell you, I'm a man of faith, so it's God that works in me. That's where I get my strength from. I didn't know what I was going to give them or what I was going to get, but I said, yes, we'll help. And she rang me at the beginning of the week, and I said, yes, we'll help. And this was the week leading to Christmas. And this family was going to have some of her children didn't live here in Coventry. Some of them lived in London and were coming to Coventry to spend the Christmas because the father had passed away, and it was going to be their first Christmas together without their dad and her husband, okay? You're with me so far?
I'm here.
Okay. So I decided that, yes, we were going to help. So what I did was I started to go around to the markets and to see anybody that would donate. Anything that they might donate. We launched what we call the Waste Not Want Not campaign, and the market, the butchers, gave me a £75 turkey, the biggest turkey I'd ever seen, and I thought to myself, yeah, right, I'm going to take this turkey for this woman. No sooner had I picked up this turkey, I got a phone call from a gentleman who told me that he had done a raffle in a pub the night before in a bar for a hamper, and he'd won the hamper, but he doesn't want it. Can he donate the hamper to my homeless charity? I thought, wow, I'll take that and I'll give that to her as well. I didn't know what was going to be in the hamper. Now I've got a hamper and I've got a turkey, so I've got something that I can give to this woman to ease her Christmas. No sooner had I organised that, I got a phone call from a drug-related support worker for probation services from about 20 miles away from where I live. And they said they'd been collecting stuff all week, and could they possibly drop it down, but it's in a van. And all of a sudden, you're beginning to get my drift so far.
I am.
Right?
You're sounding like the opposite of Grinch.
Yeah. So now I've had to go over to a car park at Tesco supermarket over the other side of Coventry to meet this van so that I can offload the stuff off that van and put it onto my van. And then I got another donation from Mr. Kipling's Cakes and some... Anyhow, cut a long story short, I actually ended up with a big van full of food. Now, I hadn't spoken to this social worker since I said that I was going to do this thing, right? So now I'm going to phone her, and I've said to her to come down now and come and see what we've got. Well, she arrived, and she just broke down in tears. She said, you haven't got this all for this woman, have you? And I said, yeah, all of it is for your woman. So she said, okay, let's drive down there and take it to her. So we've driven down to the house. Now I want to paint the picture for you so you could understand exactly what it was like.
Don't use leaded paint.
No. So I've pulled up outside the house, right? And I've got the turkey, this big £75 turkey. I've got all these
75 pounds.
a 75 pound in weight turkey, massive turkey, right? And all these foods were boxed up in different boxes, tin stuff, you name it, right? You couldn't imagine the shopping that was in there. So we said to her, let's just take a little bit to the house and pretend that that's all we've got, So the social worker's taken me into the house and now trying to introduce me to this woman. And this woman just ain't interested in me. She knows the social worker, but she doesn't know me. And the social worker is trying to introduce... And I don't normally have that reaction because I was like a celebrity in Coventry at the time. Everybody knew me, I thought. But this woman had never heard of me. And so, the social worker, Kelly, was trying to introduce me to her. And she just didn't want to talk to me. And I've got this little box in me. And you could see what was on her face. She was looking at me as if to say, what's that going to do for me and my family? Because it was only a little box, right? So I said, I'll just go and put that down over there, shall I? So I put that little box down there and I walked out the door. I went back to the van and I came back with another box, right? And now one of her sons was coming down the stairs and he's looked. And I've gone inside with the box and now she's looking at me a bit stranger now because she thought I only had the one box. Then I went back to the van and this time I came back with a 75-pound turkey. I brought the turkey in. And the son, who was one of these streetwise, pants down his ankles, baseball cap back to front, and a big reefer in his mouth, he just broke down and cried right there. He said, "No one's ever done that for us," And then his mother said, "It looks like we're going to have a Christmas." Then I went back to the van, and to cut a long story short, I kept going back to the van, box after box, box after box. Box after box, bring it into her house. By this time, she was calling all of her children from upstairs. Come and see this. Well, I sat down in this woman's house for 2 hours. She wouldn't let us leave. She was crying. Her children was crying. And I looked around her house, and the sink was being held up on with bricks, where this landlord had just allowed the house to start falling apart. There were cracks in the wall and everything else. But this woman was going to have Christmas with her children. And when we laid the stuff down, it spread across the whole of her front room floor, spread across the whole of her kitchen floor. We filled the van up and we filled her house up. And she invited us to come down and spend Christmas with her and to come and eat with her. I didn't because we had other things to do. We were actually feeding the homeless anyway. But when you see the look on the faces of the children, that, even in the midst of the fact that they'd lost their father, and they were going to be spending their first Christmas without their father. And up until the moment we arrived, they didn't know what kind of a Christmas it was going to be because they had nothing. But now they was going to have some kind of a semblance of a Christmas. They were going to be able to eat. They were going to be able to, well, there's not much more of a satisfying feeling than you can get than that. And David, if you'd actually have to have done that, been there, been part of that, contributed to that, to understand the sheer emotions that I felt seeing the satisfaction or the love that they were prepared to pour out to us after they'd received what it was that we had to give them. It's an amazing feeling. It is so rewarding, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do or take. There's no drug on this planet. There's no alcohol on this planet that can fill you up with that kind of high than when you've met somebody who is at their lowest point and you've been able to impact, to make a difference in their life at that moment.
I think it would be good to... Is Keith back?
I think Abby is... Abby, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, we lost you for a while, but you're back now.
Yes, we lost it. I don't know what happened, but anyway, we're back. I'm back.
I think it'd be good for Abby to speak about what she does, because I'm not sure most people who are listening understand the limited amount of money the United States government gives to those who need food assistance. And without people like Keith and Abby, they wouldn't have enough. In fact, in America, the U.S. Congress only gives about $1.50 per meal for each person in America, are roughly about $150 a month. It's ridiculous. We spend on food stamps every year 2% on food assistance in our country. 2%. of our budget goes to food for our own people. Yet 20% of the U.S. budget goes to defense. Now, think, for example, we give around a couple $2 billion for food stamps, and Trump wants to increase the defense budget by $54 billion. But when we give those food assistance benefits to people, 4.7 million Americans, most of them are children, are very old people, are seniors, disabled people. Most food stamp recipients are children and the elderly. They're not even able to work. They're not legally able to work if they're children. They need this food. Every dollar we give to a person in need of food assistance, that dollar is tripled in the local economy. Where do they buy the food? From a grocery store. Who makes that money? Farmers, grocery store owners, delivery boys, people who make the sacks to deliver the food in. It's all kinds of economic repercussions from doing the moral thing. But when we spend money in Iraq and Afghanistan, that doesn't help anybody in America. And that's what Keith, I think, is getting at. We need to spend money to feed our people. Who are we defending if the people we're defending are skeletons, are addicted to drugs because they have no food, are homeless people because they have no one to care for them? The alternative is ours. And if you look at the United States budget, $600 billion a year for defense, and a less than $20 billion of that, 2% of that for food for our own people. That will tell you something about the priorities of the United States of America in 2017. And it's a sad state because they say, these Republicans say they're Christians, but I don't remember Jesus spending any money on weapons. I do remember him giving food to people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, what I think here at Food Not Bombs is it's not just a charity of giving out food. I don't know if I wasn't around when Keith was speaking, but it's to create awareness of this craziness of how much money is going to the defense, of 50% or over 50% of our budget is going to defense. And people are starving. People are out in the streets. People don't have homes. Less and less is going for education. Less and less is going for social services. And so that is what we are trying to create awareness. And that is why Food Not Bombs has been, at least in the U.S., a target for some cities to try to stop us, because then you create that awareness that people might fight and stand up and say we should have less money going to the military. So one of our what do you call it? And not enemies, but people that try to stop us is the Defense Department, hugely. So I don't know if Keith told you he was, a target, supposedly a terrorist for this reason. So yeah, we give out a lot of food, which so much food gets wasted. Also, over 50% of our food gets thrown away. So we just take that food and make it for people. So there's so much food, it just doesn't get to the necessary people. But like I said, we're not a charity. We are trying to create awareness of what's going on, and at the same time of people being able to eat. Some people haven't eaten for a full week, and they get to eat healthy food with us, food that is not just fast food, GMO food, and so forth. Yeah.
Tell me about your experiences in serving to some of these people and the response that you get from them while you're feeding them or when you fed them.
Well, that is what probably changed me. Is before I started doing Food Not Bombs, it was about 4 years ago or so. So it probably around, I can't remember exactly, but it was about 4 years ago when I started doing it. I was afraid of homeless people. I was afraid. I thought they wanted something from me. They were going to ask me a question. They were going to ask me for money. I was fearful they were going to, and from sharing food with the homeless, it shifted everything. Their eyes, they would say things, thank God, thank you, praise the Lord. Whatever it was, whatever turned their heart on, they were this, I looked into their eyes, and it was the most fulfilling, beautiful experience. They so much appreciated the food, and so it just really shifted. And that's what we're trying to change, create public awareness, to ask people to come and share food so they're not so afraid of people who are poor or don't have money or living on the streets. So yeah, that's what got me into it. Part of the reason is
go on, David.
Abby, so when you leave there, have you made any friends among these people? Have you been able to help them outside of the area in which you serve them food?
Well, yeah, I've made a lot of friends. Unfortunately, as far as helping them, well, like for instance, I get blankets. I go to Goodwill and the thrift store, and I get a whole bunch of blankets, and then they know that I have a lot of them in my car. So people come up to me. I can't walk down the street without everyone saying hi. And so as far as helping them out, they know who we are. They know who Keith is. They know, who I am. And so we really, so as far as helping them, like for instance, one person didn't have any pants that were clean. So I took him to I drove him to the thrift store, and we picked up some things for him. And that was Michael, who I was informed died 2 weeks ago of hyperthermia of living outside. We have people that stay in our backyard, that sometimes stay in our house, but we can't do it all the time. Our neighbors complain, we're renters, so we do it as much as we can. If someone needs something, or one homeless person gave me a beautiful gift of this gorgeous stone, amethyst. And so, it's unbelievable. They have hardly anything, and they give away part of what they have. It's the people that have the less seem to give the most. It's pretty amazing.
For me, David, and I totally resonate with where Abby's coming from. It's the most satisfying experience that I've ever had in my life. It's the most humbling experience that I've ever had in my life. When you go and serve the homeless, and the gratitude that they have when you fed them. You see tears in their eyes when you've come across somebody who hasn't eaten for 2 weeks. And you give them something hot, just even a cup of soup with a piece of bread or some cake or something. And you just see that satisfying look in their eyes. That they love you so much at that moment that you cannot imagine or put into a package this love that they feel for you after you've just done this thing for them. I have experienced on many occasions where, just as Abby has just said, I walk through the town centres where I live, and my children used to say, how come you know all these homeless people? Because I know more homeless people than I know ordinary people. I know more drug addicts and alcoholics than I know ordinary people, because those are the people that I've chosen to work with for the last 10 years or so. So I totally understand where you're coming from. We've had drug addicts come and stay in our house, live in our house, do they cold turkey in our house. My children have seen them in our house. My youngest daughter was born while we had them in our house. So, it's something that we are pretty committed to still. And the thing is, there is no greater gift than you can give than to give of yourself. Time doesn't cost you a penny, but to a homeless person, when you give them that shoulder for them to cry on. But when you give them that slice of bread or that soup, it doesn't matter whether you cooked it yourself. The fact that you've just served it to them, they are so humbly grateful for this moment, that you are just in awe of the gratitude that they show towards you. It humbles you. It humbles you as an individual. You see life. You see the world in a totally different perspective when you dig into that homeless. And I'll tell you something else. They're probably the most genuine people that I've ever encountered in my entire life. I'm not sure if that's what you found, Abby.
Yes, that's exactly what I have found out. What you have said. In fact, they're more in touch with the earth, with what's going on, with their hearts. They're more open. They're more real. Instead of the people, including myself, that are possibly at home watching TV, into a world so far removed about what's going on from moment to moment. They're more full of life, of real life. And there's twinkles and beautiful, their eyes shine right through. And yes, you walk down the street. I know a lot of the names, their stories, their a lot, and the smiles that they have. I mean, that some of them can hardly walk, and they shouldn't be on our streets. I don't know if this is true where you live, but here in the U.S., it's I can't believe that they will let people out on the streets that can hardly walk, or that seniors, some of
you must also remember or take into account, and David, I'm not even sure if you're aware of this, but the state of some of their feet, who have lived on the streets for various different seasons, especially the hardcore who have slept on the streets for years, and that's all they've done is sleep on the streets for years, season after season, through the summer into the winter, and some of them have had the same pair of shoes on for years, right? And the state of some of their feet, and I'm not just talking about the dirt, I'm talking about the condition of their feet and their toes, the discomfort. Some of them are broken, and feet shredded. It's enough to break you.
Yes.
How on earth can some of them even stand, let alone walk?
Abby, speaking of that, do you have any assistance from local health authorities, the county, or volunteer doctors, or anybody to help people who you see particularly in need of help from a physician?
I'm sorry, could you, part of your sentence went out. I just heard the beginning.
I wanted to. Do you have help? Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have help from local medical facilities, the county or city perhaps, or volunteer doctors to help those who you've noticed to have a particular need in the area of medicine?
No, we do not have help.
So if somebody came there. So what would happen if a woman came in with a child and the child's eyes were terribly infected and you could see she needed assistance? What would you do? It seems like I would want to get on the phone and call the county right away or something.
We would ask if we can either take them to the hospital if they want to go to the hospital, or to our local county area, Emmeline, which, our local area where there is county help. But that's, we don't, because of the medical system, I don't think doctors feel comfortable about doing it, or I can't tell you, that's not what we have encountered. And a lot of people that are homeless are in the streets are too afraid to go to the hospital. They'll only go when it's really, really bad. And then a lot of times they throw them out in the streets after they're in the hospital. They throw them out.
One second, David. 1 second. Let me just say this. We had a gentleman from Kenya. David was his name. He had very, very bad knees, and they operated him. He was taken to the hospital. They operated on his knee, and And a couple of days after the operation, they chucked him back out onto the streets. We found him on the streets with his wounds seeping. We managed to put him into a accommodation, and unfortunately, a few months afterwards, he actually died in his sleep.
Wow.
But the one thing that comforts me was that he died knowing that he was cared about because we cared for him.
Wow.
Because he had been sleeping on the streets. It was a cold period at that time. It was because it was about February, March, around that time there somewhere. It was cold here in the UK. We were just getting past our winter time, so he'd been sleeping on the streets, and because of how cold it was, that wasn't very comforting for his knee either, and it would take him ages for him to just sit down when he was in it. So he preferred to stand up for as long as he could because of how uncomfortable it was for him to sit down and then for him to stand up again. And so what we'd do is we just, wherever he sat, we'd leave him there, and then we'd bring his food for him. We'd bring his food where he was. But then we decided then that we would have to try and we couldn't leave him out on the streets anymore. This was one individual that we just really couldn't. So we put some money together. I knew a friend of mine who had property that was renting out, and we got him a room, and we collected and we paid his deposit, and we paid for his rent right up until he died. And
wow.
That broke my heart because I really wish that we could have done more for him, but I think he was destined to die at some point because once they'd done the operation, they just chucked him out onto the street.
Wow. Wow.
You know, when I hear stories like that, I really become furious knowing that Donald Trump is flying to Florida to his winter house for the third time in 4 weeks at the cost of $10 million every weekend. And on top of that, we're spending $1 million a day protecting his wife in New York and another $1 million a day protecting his children who are flying all over the world collecting speaker fees.
Bearing in mind that we're only paying that X amount on his wife in New York because she's not allowed to stay in the White House.
Well, she is allowed, but she doesn't want to. But the point is we're wasting $5 million a day on Donald Trump's security and for his children, and we can't feed our own people. Isn't there something wrong here? I mean,
there's something terribly wrong with that picture. Now, going on to that subject, because I really want to get into this. We've only got half an hour left of this show, and I want to hit this point. So, at what point did you start getting harassment from the police where you get to a point where you're labelled as a terrorist organisation, and then the police start hounding you as you start feeding these homeless people? Tell me some more about that.
I should get Pete. Hey, Pete. 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 I'm trying to get a hold of him. Keith knows more about that topic, but here in Santa Cruz, I can tell you we don't. There are some people that are starting to harass us. And Kat, can you get Keith?
Here I've got. Let me just help you. And I'm going way back to 1988. The San Francisco police arrested 9 volunteers for making a political statement at the entrance to the Golden Gate Park on Monday, August the 15th. You've also had problems in Washington, New York. 300 arrests in the summer of 1989 after shutting down a 27-day occupation in support of the homeless. New chapter started in most of the major cities of Canada. I'm just trying to see if I can. Tampa Bay, I saw something at Tampa Bay. Activists were arrested in Tampa Bay. Was that Desiree Lynn? I think she was one of those that was arrested there. There were no altercations, no illicit substances, no bad behavior. But yet they were arrested on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I can talk about the arrests of Funab Bombs in '88.
Yeah, I want to hit some of that, how they managed to term you as a terrorist group and how you continue to find yourself picked on by law enforcement. And there are some pictures that I've even seen where the police are actually now going into parks looking for homeless people after you guys have gone in and fed them and chasing them out.
Yeah, so in 1988, we were set up at the entrance to Golden Gate Park, and we were sharing food there as we had done for several months, every Monday. And they had this hippie had said we could get a permit, and so we applied for the permit, but never heard until August 15th of 88 when 45 riot police came out of the Golden Gate Park and arrested 9 of us. And that's what became the start of a total of what was 1,000 arrests in San Francisco for sharing free food. The last 700 roughly were for what's called felony conspiracy to serve food in violation of a court order because they had made a law against sharing food. But we discovered on Thanksgiving weekend, Thanksgiving in the United States being the last weekend of last Thursday of November, that we were considered one of America's most hardcore terrorist groups. And that's where we first learned this information from some people would go away for their holidays, and then they'd be at the airport, and a National Guards person would come up in uniform and see us wearing the Food Not Bombs badge button with the purple carrot and the purple fist and the carrot, and then go, "Oh my God, we just studied you in domestic terrorism school. You're America's most hardcore terrorist group." And so eventually, in the United States, they have the American Civil Liberties Union, and they did Freedom of Information Act requests for all kinds of protests and stuff, and found out that the Joint Terrorism Task Force was busy investigating Food Not Bombs. For example, they staked us out outside of a McDonald's where we were handing out literature on being vegan to everybody as they left the drive-through in North Carolina. And so over the years, we kept finding out more and more about how we were parts of domestic terrorism investigations. And quite a number of us ended up being framed. I myself, in 94, ended up facing 25 to life in prison, where I was attacked by first the mayor's film commissioner and Nick Rommel, and then later on I was attacked by another right-wing anti-homeless politician and charged with assault, battery, or actually in that case, assault with a deadly weapon. And so I did a total of 500 days according to the district attorney, Arlo Smith, and got credit for time served when I settled the case in 1995.
Wow. And what is it about your operation that they deem to be terrorism?
Well, there was a couple of different points. In April of 2009, I happened to come across a lecture by 2 State Department officials in the U.S. State Department comparing the people that share vegan meals in the park with Al-Qaeda, who is more dangerous. And in that lecture, which I happened to see on the government station here, C-SPAN, twice, they claimed that it was we were a threat because we were inspiring people to think that money should be spent on healthcare, education, social services, rather than so much of it going to the military. In the United States, we spend 50 cents of every tax dollar that we pay in income taxes on the military. And so that is where they feel that we were undermining the authority of the government, and that there may be pressure to reduce military spending, and that was considered an act of terrorism. But they've also done things like to try to get us to be terrorists, so to speak, and actually trying to get our volunteers to do acts of violence, which we refuse to do. And then in their frustration, they will say that we were really trying to do it and arrest people, and then they will go to trial. And so we've had a number of people, unfortunately, do time in federal prison or in state prison for acts of terrorism that they themselves have actually never participated in, that were completely conspiracies created by the FBI. So that is the fact that our name is food and not bombs is where the real part of the issue is. And the second is that you see visibly this line of people needing food in the richest country in the world, and under the banner Food Not Bombs, it just emotionally moves people to think, wow, we should be doing something about poverty and healthcare and education here in the United States, rather than spend our resources on the military. And so, they just see that the combination of free meals in the street as a threat. But then locally what happens, which is what's not why we're called terrorists, but locally the reason, in part, that 71 cities in the United States have made laws banning or restricting the sharing of food outside is that they don't want local political pressure to divert tax dollars from programs that developers want to do or other business interests want. Instead, have that money go to helping homeless services where it's not as profitable. And so also to drive the visible poverty out of the area so that, with this theory that property values will increase if you hide this crisis of homelessness, and that homelessness being so present in your community, is a threat to business and to property values and things like that. So everybody has a different reason in the efforts to get rid of Food Not Bombs. But in the end, we keep persisting. So we've been arrested, and not only the 1,000 times in San Francisco, but also we've been arrested in Fort Lauderdale, most recently Tampa, Florida, Orlando, Florida, Arcata, California, Los Angeles. And we just keep coming out and sharing food. And eventually the cities just stop their prosecution.
Wow. I mean, you guys have been through an amazing roller coaster journey since the 80s, since you formed yourselves. Have you managed to turn people around from feeding them as homeless and turning them into volunteers on your project?
Well, we had, when we started, of course, a couple of things. There was people thought, for example, that the hungry people were in Africa or Asia, that there wasn't poverty in America because we were so segregated. Our poverty was in black neighborhoods or housing projects or in ghettos. And then our education and stuff has made more people aware that actually there is a problem of poverty in the United States. And over the years, there's been more and more, popular efforts to try to stop, anti-homeless campaigns and things like that amongst just community activists. So there are homeless coalition efforts all over the United States. There's that type of activity. I think Food Not Bombs has played a big role in that. And I know, for instance, also we are known as people who have encouraged switching to a plant-based diet as a way to get more food and productivity from an acre of land and feed more people. So I hear a lot about people saying we're like the grandparents of veganism in the United States. And then on the other hand, the other thing that's happened is I've met many people that live on the streets or who used to live on the streets who are no longer living on the streets because they felt empowered by participating with Food Not Bombs. One of those, the most famous of those people is now the band Green Day, which is very, very famous, touring band. They were people that were real poor and lived in squats and so on, and they put together a little punk band called Green Day, and they then started cooking with Food Not Bombs, and this became very empowering. And then eventually, as we know, Green Day became this mega band that we now, that many people have heard of. And there's story after story of people who felt empowered by participating with Food Not Bombs, first eating with Food Not Bombs, and then cooking with Food Not Bombs, and then felt that their opinion was taken seriously, and as a result, got off the streets because they felt human again, basically, instead of that being dehumanized as the other that is so often the case.
I would like to point out that last year in San Antonio, Texas, a food chef, Joan Cheever, set out with professional food preparers and served food, vegetable soup, lamb meatballs over wheat pasta, braised southern greens, and roasted beets to some poor people. And she was given a $2,000 citation by the police of San Antonio. And she asked, is it illegal to give free food to poor people or to hungry people? Do Good Samaritans get ticketed in San Antonio? And the police officer said, yes, yes. And 31 cities in America ban the practice of giving food and charity to poor people within their city limits. In Daytona, Florida, they levied $2,000 fines for doing so as well. And they gave a ticket in Fort Lauderdale to a 91-year-old World War II veteran for sharing his food with homeless people. So I think that this Miss Abbott is going to take a case to the court and argue on the free assembly clause, meaning in the First Amendment, we have the right to assemble with the people we choose and associate with those people. Well, if we can protect the right of Nazis to march through a Jewish neighborhood in Chicago, I think we can protect the rights of Good Samaritans who want to feed the poor people, even though the rich may find that somewhat offensive and in their face. But more importantly, I think there's going to be a case made to stop this case on a religious issue. In many people's religions, I'm a Jew, Christians have the same religion, you have to feed the poor, you have to share, you have to give tzedakah, you're commanded to feed the poor. So if the government, local police, local communities, if they inhibit us from our right to practice our faith, which is to feed the poor, then they're violating our constitutional rights. And these laws may be struck down on that in the future. So keep hope.
Well, we're hoping. Yeah, with Arnold Abbott's case, it's one of two cases that's in Fort Lauderdale. Food Not Bombs was another case. Right. We lost the appellate court. Interesting, though, when you mentioned San Antonio. Very interesting connection to San Antonio and Fort Lauderdale. There is a person by the name of Robert Marbut who was hired by San Antonio and by people in Fort Lauderdale and many cities who have been, who was a consultant on how to end homelessness. And his theory that he promoted in Fort Lauderdale, which was used to justify the arrest of Arnold Abbott and of Food Not Bombs and the other groups there, is that feeding people outside, what they're calling now street feeding, is only encourages people to be homeless and to stay homeless. And so here in Santa Cruz this year, already in January, the organization trying to get rid of Food Not Bombs here emailed a news report about Robert Marbut, suggesting that the city and the county look into hiring him to get rid of the homeless, to create this public relations idea that our meal at the corner of outside the post office is keeping people homeless because they aren't going to get drug rehabilitation and alcohol services. And there's this idea implicit in this that everybody that's on the street is on there because they're a personal failure and that the economy has nothing to do with it. And Marbut was made famous by the Arnold Abbott case, and he actually started his program, this theory, in San Antonio in 2000, I think in 9, he was starting already to promote it. He was able to help build actually what sounds like a pretty good program, cost $100 million, which was a multi-purpose center to help the homeless. 1,000 people apparently could stay there, which is fantastic. but it was not a cure for homelessness in San Antonio. And here, years later, as you mentioned, these people from the church are trying to hand out food there, and the police are trying to stop them. And that's part of this overall program that is being promoted. And in the 80s and 90s, there was a similar, different ideology, but it was sort of pop psychology being used to justify efforts to drive the homeless out of sight. And that was called the Broken Window Study. And part of the Broken Window Study, which was first advocated in 1982, of all things, in the March edition of Atlantic Monthly, became very popular. And a series of crimes were determined called quality of life crimes. And a quality of life crime was sleeping outside, sitting on the sidewalk, public urination, anything where cigarette smoking in public, things like that, and public drinking and whatnot. Anything that a person that didn't have a house which would normally happen inside of a house, if it happened outside, it was a quality of life violation, amongst other things like toll evasion and so on. And that was then justified to do massive anti-homeless law enforcement efforts. And those law enforcement efforts included, as it turned out, the arrest of food not bombs in San Francisco and efforts to end the public feeding of people in cities all over the U.S. And so there's 31 cities that have out now banned, a total of at least 71 that have restrictions.
And here's the thing. What do you think about the police using their resources to go out and arrest, harass people that are just out there trying to feed the homeless?
I'm sorry?
What do you think about the police using their resources to harass and arrest people like yourselves trying to feed?
Even police departments object to their resources being used for this. And we've spoken to a lot of officers who just are like, wow, I got the job to stop, violent crimes, murder, robberies, things like that. And instead I'm moving people along because they've fallen asleep. Or I'm like, involved in major raids against people living on the streets. And so even the law enforcement community is a little disheartened by this in some cases. And we hear complaints. It's obviously a huge waste of resources.
Absolutely. So you say that, food's not bombs now are worldwide now, right? Are you there, Keith? You there, David?
I am here. And I'd like to point out also something, Kervin. There are 43 million Americans living in food insecure households. 43 million. Now get this. In Mississippi, 20% of the population. Arkansas, 20%. Louisiana, 18%. Alabama, 17%. Kentucky, 17%. Ohio, 16%. Those are the first 6 states, all right? What do they all have in common? They're all southern red Republican states. Right. Every single one of them vote for the richest people in America. Alabama was the number 1 state voting. 90% of the whites in Alabama voted for Trump. I mean, it is ridiculous. When you look at the next 6 on the list, they're Oregon, which is a blue state, and then you've got North Carolina, Maine, Oklahoma, Texas, and Tennessee. Almost all of those states, all but 2, are southern red states that vote solid Republican, and they're the poorest, least educated people in this country. And it makes you wonder, why do these people vote for the very officials who will strip them of health care, of food, and of education? Why? That is the real question here.
Yeah.
Why? Why would I go and vote for somebody who's going to take away my school, take away my health care, and take away my measly food allowance. I don't understand it.
It's a big struggle for me. It's because it's something I'm passionately or I have been passionately involved in, and I was for many years. Although I'm not as involved in it now as I was then, it's still something that's very still close to my heart. And we never encountered the problems that Food Not Bombs have encountered in America, and I, for the life of me, can't understand or work out why law enforcement would make it their business, their mission, their goal, to go and harass these people who were just setting up a peaceful area so they can give people that were starving and homeless something to eat. And I, for the life of me, I cannot understand why they would make that they would put that on their agenda and say, well, this is what we're going to do today, and go away feeling good about it, because I struggle with that. We got a lot of help. So
well,
I can't.
Kervin, but Britain and America are a little bit different.
Absolutely.
After World War I, Britain became more of a country dedicated toward a socialist principle. In America, we are a country devoted to war at all times. The number one priority for this country is war. This country is always at war. I can't remember in my lifetime when we were not at war.
Yeah.
It's my father's lifetime. We're just a warring nation, and we talk about peace and love and law, and we're the most lawless, gun-ridden, war-loving, battle-fatigued country in the history of the world. Yeah. And when you look at the resources we spend, in 10 years, $6 trillion on war. At some point, it's got to end. And I'm afraid the fiddler is on the roof and he's fiddling.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen.
And he's worse than Nero. But when I look at these poor people, when I look at people with no health care, when I look at hungry people, when I leave the grocery store, I am sickened to my heart when I see these. There are people outside of our grocery stores who are waiting for a handout. It's that bad. And I don't understand what kind of a society people driving around with Mercedes and BMWs, and they ignore those people. They act like they're non-existent, Kervin.
I've often said, right, in many of the interviews that I've given and some of the videos that you'll see posted around YouTube, a homeless guy, to me, is not a grey-bearded old man drinking a can out of a brown paper bag, sleeping on a park bench. In fact, he's someone's father, someone's brother, someone's uncle, someone's son. He belongs to someone and matters to someone. And just because he may have made a few wrong turns in his life or found himself in an uncomfortable circumstance, that doesn't make him any different to you and I. We're only 3 steps away from homelessness ourselves. In the comfy pads that we live in, most of these guys, we're talking about a relationship breakdown, where it starts off maybe their marriage is falling apart, they lose their job, and before you know it, there is a cycle that they start falling into that leads them to the streets of homelessness. So they're no different than you and I. We often say that there, for the grace of God we go, but these guys are really no different than you and I. They are somebody that matters to somebody, and they weren't born homeless. They've just found themselves in that circumstance right now,
Well, one important person that was born homeless was Jesus.
Yeah.
And what's really terrible is that you have Jesus being born homeless, but they have so many people who go faithfully to church every Sunday, but walk over these people that are living on the streets.
Absolutely.
And when we have developed so many deep personal relationships with people living on the streets. And it's just touching their story of how they might have ended up on the streets. They talk of their families. And
here's the difference. Our churches here in the UK operate totally different to the churches that you have out there in America. Most of our churches here in the UK have some form of outreach that's reaching out to the homeless in particular. It's the one thing that most churches try to commit themselves to, is to outreach to the vulnerable and the homeless. I don't understand how that's not the same in America, because it's the Church of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. It's outrageous.
But hey,
Well, I mean,
we're guys, we're 4 minutes away before the show finishes. So last words, please, quickly. The last words.
Well, really, I hope people will volunteer with Food Not Bombs in their community, wherever they're listening. And they can find out more at foodnotbombs.net. And I so appreciate your comments and questions on this program.
Well, we just like to thank you guys for coming up and making yourselves available, especially at this particular time where you're preparing food to go out and feed. It was an honor and a privilege to share this time with you guys. And I'm just hoping that we can update our listening audience with another visit with you guys in a short while, a couple of months or something, where we can, probably try and get a more detailed thing together. But I just want to thank you and Abby for being with us today. And I'm going to leave the last words with Dr. David Ramey.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Abby. And I'd just like to remind everybody, when you help a person in need, don't look at them in an angry way. Don't throw the money down to their hat. Don't look away from them. Don't tell them what to buy with the money you give them. Don't lecture them. Don't inquire about their personal lives. Give them what you're going to give them in their hand. Shake their hand, and then look at them in the eye and say, thank you for letting me help you. Yeah. Because when you do that, you become the better person. And that's the way it is from Connecticut.
Well, guys, I just want to thank you for this absolutely awesome show that we've done today. Thank you, Keith, and the team from Food Not Bomb. And we are going to stay in touch, in communication and updates. Please feel free to post stuff on our walls and on issues today and etc. and update us on anything that's going on where you are. And we will be glad to support and encourage in any way that we can. Keith and Abby, we thank you very much. And Dr. David Ramey, as always, I look forward to meeting you here. Same time, same place. Next Saturday, right here, our normal time, David, 6 o'clock.
Yep.
1 o'clock your time.
Yes, it's very
where
good.
we will be featuring Loving an Alien.
Yay!
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. We're out of here.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, we did it.
I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. I already did my time. I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival. It was do or die. I had too many rivals. I was too young and foolish to stay in.
I just want to thank everybody for joining us again on Issues Today with World Jam Global Radio. And we'll be back next Saturday night at our normal time, 6 o'clock. Loving an Alien is the featured subject. Can't wait. We're out of here.